I remember Operation Solidarity very well. I was relatively new. I'd only emigrated in 1981, and it was a tumultuous time. 81 was a boom time in BC. 82 it turned and was depressing, and then I remember the election of 83 when Dave Barrett lost. The only election I've never voted in because I wasn't allowed to. I wasn't a citizen. And of course, the infamous bills that then came in and the turmoil that ensued.
So in 1983, when the Solidarity movement was happening in British Columbia, I was a student. I was a student at Centennial Secondary School in Coquitlam, and I remember my teachers were going to be participating in that. And I remember supporting my teachers because at that time we were already seeing some of the drastic changes hitting the BC education system.
At the time I was a city bus driver for, it was then BC Transit. The union was ICTU. We were not in the House of Labour, so we weren't integrally part of the Canadian Labour Congress or the BC Fed. But I remember the Operation Solidarity. It had the full support, and of course the highlight was the march to Empire Stadium.
I know that there was also things going on in the labor movement. That I was only 17, so I wasn't a part of the labor movement yet. But as a high school student, I certainly saw what was happening there. I saw what was happening to the poorest British Columbians at the time, and really wanted to be part of something bigger than that. My dad was also involved in the education system at the time, so helped him and took my cue from him, from my mother and my grandmother, who was very involved in resisting some of those changes. And I remember walking into Empire Stadium with the big march and rally they had there with tens of thousands of other people throughout the Lower Mainland, saying that these sorts of cuts, these sorts of attacks on union rights, attacks on poor people, attacks on our healthcare system, attacks on our education system, attacks on trade unions, we were going to stand up and we were going to say no to that.
So we all parked our vehicles, left them, all in uniform, and we rallied just off Boundary Road at the bottom of the little hill going up to Hastings. And I think it was about 2,000 of us, and most of the people were already in the stadium by this time, so there was an atmosphere. You could hear it as you were getting closer as we marched in. And I remember marching that stadium. It looked like one of those parades from the Olympic Games. The people are going crazy and cheering, and we had a big block and marched in, and by this time the place was packed. The place was packed. And I remember the speakers being on, but really there was just so much in the atmosphere going that there was an expectation. This was something momentous that was happening. Nobody knew where it was going to go as well, and it was exciting. It was really exciting. It was. You know, the reasons we were there were not good, but the coming together like this was something I have never seen since that day. I mean, we've had some pretty big marches, but that was a one of a kind.
It was an incredibly powerful thing to be part of, and to feel the power of people standing together and what they can achieve, even when the other side has got all the tools of government on their side. If enough people get together and stand up and say, no, we're going to do things differently, things do happen differently. I think we've seen a little bit of with the kids in the United States, where the government has had to walk some of that stuff back because people have stood together and say no.
35 years on, unfortunately, it seems that we've got to keep trying to have to do these things every so often just to keep status quo.
I think it's always a challenge for people because we're all very busy and we all have our own issues that we have to deal with in our work lives, in our family lives, in our communities. But it's always important to take the time and the interest to find out what's happening with other people, because the situations that we are facing, other people are facing, and the situations that other people are facing, we are either facing them now or we will be facing them in the future. So it's important to keep those lines of communication open, to keep those lines of solidarity open, to keep those lines of communication open, and to keep ourselves knowledgeable. I think the kids today call it woke. It's important that people stay woke to what's happening around us, because if we're trying to resist these things as individuals, we will not be successful. If we can work together with others, we can be successful.
The Solidarity movement was unique. While it was predominantly Labour, it was much broader than that. It brought together coalitions from all over. This was one of the most unmitigated attack on not just working people, but people as a whole. If you weren't in that elite group, this was an attack on your lifestyle. Solidarity was the response to that attack.